here. It's great to be here, and thanks for everybody for joining us. I want to talk about first off a bit about Siri, who we are, and kind of touch on what we do. I want to talk about the reality of British imperialism in Ireland and what Republican socialist activists face because of draconian legislation and so on. Touch on about what Ruby has touched on, prisoners and issues they face in British and Free State jails in Ireland. So we'll just get started here. I have prepared a kind of a speech just so I'm not rambling on and kind of get lost and sidetracked. So I will be reading off stuff I have prepared, and just so I can keep it slow and understand it better. So there's not a language barrier, as I say, so I don't ramble on. So we'll just get started here. Siri was established in September 2016. Soon after, an enthusiastic and energetic youth group belonging to Siri was also established called ASTIGI, which translates to Listen Up in English. The establishment of the party came after a significant collective of Irish Republican activists who for a number of years acted autonomously after a number of years of debate, consultation and organisation constituted and launched a revolutionary Irish Republican Socialist Party called Siri. Siri believes that Ireland should be governed by the Irish people with the wealth and the wealth producing mechanisms and the ownership of the Irish people. This cannot happen while British imperialism undemocratically retains control of Irish destinies and partitions our nation. This cannot happen while a neo-colonial elite and a subservient supposed indigenous administration sells Irish nation labour and natural resources to international capital. Siri does not believe that British imperialism or capitalist exploitation can be confronted in the structures they have created to consolidate their undemocratic control of the Irish nation. As such, Siri believes any assembly claiming to speak for the Irish people by the united Irish people of the Irish nation to be illegal. Siri will seek to organise and work with the Irish people rather than be consumed and usurped by the structures of Ireland's enemies. Standing on a long and proud revolutionary Irish Republican history of resistance, inspired by the actions and words of Tone, Connolly, Mellows, Costello, and Dos Sands, we in Siri strive to build a movement that gives the oppressed people a right to fight for a better future. We believe in social and economic justice, working class unity regardless of religion, national self-determination, and vital national solidarity. We believe in and will fight for the liberation for oppressed communities in society, those oppressed because of their gender, race, ethnicity, and sexual orientation. The reality of British imperialism in Ireland. Republican socialist activists within working class areas throughout the occupied 6 counties of Ireland have always been the target of the foot soldiers of imperialism. The PSNI, RUC, MI5 and British Army, since the formation of Siri, Republican activists and their families have seen attacks led by these militias increase by tenfold. Thousands of stop and searches, house raids, detentions, and interrogations have been recorded by Republicans in recent years, both in the occupied 6 counties and 26-county Free State. The increase of this harassment is no doubt a fearful response to the establishment of a revolutionary vehicle that rebuilt and solidified Republican socialist structures and relevance within working class communities. A vehicle that would challenge the status quo head on with energy and enthusiasm, shook the British and Free State establishments to their core, leaving them no other option but to lash out. Unfortunately, those that become the voice of opposition to oppression, imperialism, and capitalism find themselves faced with an unrelenting enemy, hell-bent on breaking them and their families. These are but a few tactics the British have used to try and break Irish Republicans and their families. On a daily basis, activists are certain to be detained under controversial draconian legislation. This entails a degrading body and sometimes vehicle search. Any passengers in the vehicle or in your company will also be subject to this search, almost all the time family and young children. During these stop and searches, activists and their families are met with abuse, degradation, and aggression by heavily armed men and women of the state, determined to cause maximum disruption to the activists' day-to-day life, and in a lot of cases, they succeed in instilling fear and trauma into children that are present. The use of stop and searches in the occupied 6 counties has for a long time been found to be an infringement of the victim's basic human rights, even in British courtrooms. Yet in recent years, Republicans have recorded tens of thousands of stop and searches, with some activists being detained up to 4 or 5 times in the same day. Heavy-handed house raids are also a recurrent theme for Republicans and their families. These incidents, again, in recent times, have become increasingly aggressive and sinister. Raids led sometimes by MI5 or the British Army lead to activists being detained and hauled off to interrogation centres, while their homes are ransacked and occupants abused and assaulted. Recent raids of family homes have resulted in the children of Republicans also being detained, and in one recent case, a child with additional needs was brutally assaulted and detained. All this designed to break the will of Republicans and their families, which has failed time and time again. With direct aggression and failed tactics by the Crown forces persevere, in the background, the British occupational forces, at the behest of MI5, have now started to weaponise various agencies and businesses to target activists and their families. In September 2019, the English commander of the occupation forces in Ireland, Simon Byrne, stated, quote, "You carry on doing this, we will have your house. If you keep going, we will have your car, we will have your kids, we will have your benefits, and we will have you put in jail," unquote. These were not idle threats. In recent months, Simon Byrne and MI5 have made sinister and malicious allegations to car insurance companies and banks used by Republicans and even social services. All resulted in car insurances being stabbed, bank accounts and money being frozen and dissolved, and a number of activists receiving calls from social services stating that the Crown forces had made allegations of child abuse in the family home. In each and every case, social services found no truth or evidence in any accusations put forward by the Crown forces, and even after dialogue with Republicans, social services accepted they were being weaponised and ensured Republicans that in the future, similar cases they were reviewed before being used as pawns to target innocent families. Syria are in no doubt the sinister and nefarious agencies are at play. In the latest ploy of freezing bank accounts, a Republican activist, heavily pregnant with an 18-month-old son, was targeted after she refused to work as an informer for MI5. While the old tactics of political policing, draconian legislation, felon setting, and malicious prosecutions have continued unabated, these new tools have been directed at activists and their families to literally starve them into submission and psychologically abuse and traumatize their children. The threat of imprisonment, however, is age-old to revolutionaries here in Ireland. Unfortunately, the use of internment, the revocation of licences, fabricated charges, extradition, and miscarriages of justice are very real and ongoing issues Republican activists are faced with. Despite what former revolutionaries and bourgeois reformists say, the cases of Zach Smith, Liam Campbell, Kieran Maguire, and the Craig Avon II are clear evidence of the continued use of each of the above mentioned injustices. Injustices inflicted on those who refuse to bend the knee. Whilst held captive, Republican political prisoners are faced with inhumane, degrading, and unjustified treatment. Controlled movement, criminalisation, and forced strip searches are the order of the day for Republicans unfortunate enough to find themselves in prison. Forced isolation of prisoners has been described as one of the cruelest forms of torture. It is a slow process, day after day, week after week, month after month, and year after year, the slow erosion of oneself. This torturous tactic is designed to strip you of all that you believe in and all that you know, to reflect on what has you there in the first place, and to repent. In the case of the revolutionary, it is used in the attempt to strip them of their political identity and consciousness, to break them in a way that is far more destructive than physical violence, to tear away at every facet of what makes them revolutionaries, and to cripple the desire to resist and to fight. The removal of these is intended to produce what imperialism needs to function: compliant victims. Another aim of forced isolation is the erosion of one's personality, to become immersed in the institutionalized system of compliance, to flounder aimlessly through the days because you're alone and can no longer see that these fabrications are utterly destructive. The moment the prisoner ceases to resist, Imperialism has won the battle, and it was this proud spirit of resisting such measures which led Republican and anti-imperialist prisoners to take the dramatic step of embarking on the most recent hunger strike. A Palestinian activist and advocate for Irish freedom, Dr. Issam Hajawi, who has a wide range of medical requirements and complex health issues, required medical attention from the day he found himself incarcerated. The British jail administration, controlled by MI5, refused to allow Issam the treatment he needed. This was strongly challenged by Issam and his comrades in Row House, which houses Republican political prisoners. After finally being taken to an outside hospital for his treatment, Issam, upon return to Maghaberry jail, was forced into isolation in filth and squalor among ordinary criminal prisoners. The British administration in Maghaberry, led by MI5, again showed their true intentions of creating an environment where Republican and anti-imperialist prisoners would naturally resist. Upwards of 50 political prisoners across Ireland embarked on a hunger strike to protest the forced isolation of their Palestinian comrade, Dr. Issam Hajawi. This led to numerous demonstrations and protests of support throughout Ireland and across the globe. People in their hundreds took to the streets in their own communities to show their support for the current political prisoners in Ireland. This did not sit easy with the British establishment, and this was evident as they began to attack, arrest, and place draconian bail conditions on those who came out to show their support for the political prisoners in Ireland. The hunger strike came to an end after 14 days when Issam was reunited with his comrades in Row House. The aftermath of the strike saw some prisoners being taken to outside hospitals after losing worrying amounts of weight. Although physically weak, Republican prisoners were and remain steadfast, determined, and mentally strong at the cold face of oppression. Political prisoners in Ireland have resisted such measures at a great cost to both themselves and their families. Unfortunately, much of light throughout these prison struggles are omitted, ignored, and unaddressed by the media. Furthermore, to their detriment, there exists extensive misinformation and misconception surrounding conditions and events within the jails and the nature of their captivity. This is why revolutionary international solidarity is vital, to amplify our messages and be a voice for those that are shackled throughout the world. I'd now like to take this opportunity to send a revolutionary solidarity, love, and support on behalf of Syria and the Republican movement to those currently held captive and on hunger strike in Zionist jails for freedom and justice. I would also like to extend a continued hand of comradeship to the groups that are present here this evening who continue to campaign for the revolutionary prisoners in Ireland and in Palestine, and to those here who continue to struggle against the ruthlessness of imperialism and capitalism. It is imperative we move forward together in unity and solidarity, shoulder to shoulder, and continue to shake the foundations of oppression wherever we find ourselves. Again, I would just like to thank the organisers for allowing me to speak this evening, and thanks to the participants for listening. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Jude. Again, that's a fantastically important speech. Thanks very much